What's up, everybody? Welcome back to On the Warpath. It's Sanchez 405. If you're new, make sure you click that subscribe button. Hit the bell so you get notifications anytime new content posts. As always, like, comment, share this video out because we talk Washington Commanders all the time. And I tell you, there's nobody that I love having on here than an admin pro. And we got a lot of pros here. But the man next to me right now, the doctor, I'm going to call him doctor here, Dr. Pete Medhurst is in the building here. Pete, how are you doing?
Corey, good to be with you as always, pal.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here, man. And it's been a minute, but, you know, we talk to Commanders all the time. And you can also catch Pete. He's doing this from the land of the sun out there in Phoenix, Arizona, and Nat's Talk as well. So you can listen to him. What time tonight, Pete?
Game time is set for 9:40 Eastern time tonight. So, in fact, it's busy times here because the Nuggets are in our hotel as well. I've already ridden down the elevator with a Nugget and back up the elevator with a Nugget. They're here in town taking on Kevin Durant and the Phoenix Suns tonight, and these two buildings are right next to each other. So it's going to be a party here in Phoenix tonight, no doubt about that.
You're not going to take a dip in the pool though at Chase
No,
Field, right?
I got too much. I got too much time to get ready for a game to be part. I have been told I need to somehow find a way to get to the concourse and get to the grilled cheese sandwich stand, which is apparently amazing here at this ballpark. So we'll see.
Ooh, that's gonna say. I bet you could put it on the street corner and it just melts. But
Yeah.
you know, breaking news this afternoon just coming out. Chase Roullier has been released. Of course, we know he had the leg injury against Denver back in 2021 and came into this season in 22. Had some struggles being healthy and missed most of the season there. Just talk about this dynamic and who do you think is going to fill in that void for him coming into 2023 for the Commanders?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody's surprised one iota that this took this route. Unfortunately, look, when Chase is a healthy football player, he's a good football player. But again, when you've got a guy now that shows, especially in the interior line, an injury history like this, it does become a much higher risk. And I believe Stromberg can start. The question is, and you know how this staff is, we brought in Nick Gates, so we've got to make sure that Nick Gates, has an ample opportunity to compete here. And again, Gates gives you position flexibility. So if Stromberg does win the center job, Gates is a guy that obviously can back up at center, can also back up at either guard position for you. So from that standpoint, I think Washington's fine. And I don't think anybody's surprised in the least that Chase gets released. If he's not hurt, then they're probably not drafting Ricky Stromberg. As you know, I wanted them to draft John Michael Schmitz, but the Giants took him, early in second day. And, I really have no problem with what Washington chose instead of him because I believe that player will meet a need as well. So it's obviously going to be Stromberg or Gates now that starts at the center position.
And you talk about Ricky Stromberg, the center out of Arkansas. And the big reason why I wanted you on here was because I know there are very few people in the market that know college football the way you do. So I know you've seen a lot of these cats play. And we talk at the top of the board. And at pick 16, Washington takes cornerback Emanuel Forbes, who's probably the second coming of Fred Smoot out of Mississippi State. And but Bulldog, he's got the ball hacking abilities. I said, if he's at a powder party, he'd be hanging out with Jim Irsay because it just got a big nose for the football. And don't sue me, Jim. But anyway, a lot of fans were pounding the table. They were like, "Why Christian Gonzalez is there?" This guy, and you know what? I went back and looked at it, Pete, because I like to do my research. Mm-hmm. And the knocks, there were subtle knocks on Christian Gonzalez. He doesn't fit the mold of a quarterback. He doesn't have that killer instinct. To me, it said like he didn't have that dog in him. And, when Washington has their mind set on something, like you said about bringing in Nick Gates as opposed to playing the young Stromberg, they're gonna get their guy, and this is what they did with Emanuel Forbes. But just tell me, what did you think of that pick, and how, and also this draft? Did Washington get better? That's the question that I think always needs to be answered through the draft, but nobody's been able to say yay or nay on that.
Well, let's face it, Corey, when you evaluate a draft, most people, of course, look at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, the positions that we can quantify with a ton of analytics.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go to the analytical file on Emanuel Forbes. 2021, he was Elvis Patterson. You go look at that Georgia film from 2021. It's not pretty. Quarterbacks had a 90% quarterback rating against him in 2021. He cut that in half this year. Quarterback rating was 44. So he took a huge step forward. And as you mentioned, the ball just seems to find him. Some guys, just that's an innate ability that they have to be around the football, whether it's off deflection. Now, look, he's going to try and jump routes. There's no doubt about that. He is going to be susceptible to pump and goes probably early in the season, or at least he is going to get tried on pump and goes, I think, a lot when he's on the field until he shows the discipline necessary to play at this level against pros who are going to execute more cleanly on a week-by-week basis. I think the difference between Forbes and Gonzalez is simple. I believe there's more ceiling for Forbes, and I think Gonzalez is what he is right now, which is a good football player.
Right.
Had they chosen Gonzalez, it would have been fine. Forbes probably has a little bit more growth in there, and that's probably what they're banking on, why they went there, and I'm sure Fred Smoot was politicking behind the scenes in the building every time he had a chance for the Mississippi State Bulldog.
Oh, he probably called on the right number because I know he has like 3 phones. But I looked down this draft. You got I feel like you got a Bobby McCain replacement at that second pick in Illinois, and I kind of stepped back and I was like, "Ooh," I said, "Really, another DB in this situation?" But if you look at it, he kind of fits the mold of what Washington is trying to do. Quan Davis is. Talk about that pick a little bit in day 2.
Go look at that Illinois secondary last year and look where all those guys got drafted this year. They're all good football players.
Mm-hmm.
So I think from that standpoint, you got a guy that I think, sure, he's certainly insurance opposite Cam Curl, but he might be insurance in case Cam Curl sets the price too high in terms of his free agent opportunity that is around the corner as well. So I think Washington has to be prepared in case a team comes in and just offers Cam money that they can't match because of the contracts they've handed out recently to guys like Allen, guys like Payne, and certainly, as we know, Chase Young, without his 5th year being picked up, if he plays well, they may want to re-examine a contract there. Same thing with Montez Sweat, who is a guy that they'll be looking at potentially extending as well. So I think from that standpoint, if Cam's play this year necessitates really good money on the free agent market, I think he's insurance in case Cam just prices his way out of Washington with his play as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. And, look at this draft. We're not going through all those picks, but I'll ask you this. We'll play a little superlative. What was the most interesting pick to you when you
Henry, no question, the 5th round. Mm-hmm. This was a guy that was a 5-star coming out of high school, goes to a defensive line full of stars. And the biggest thing is everybody goes, well, how come why he went to the 5th round? Why? Sure, if you gauge the analytics, there's only so many sacks to go around on that Clemson defense. They had 2 guys go in the 1st round. They had a linebacker go in the 2nd round. And, still had tons of hurries, hits, ended up with 5 sacks as well. I believe he is terrific value in the 5th round. And because he plays a position that is under the microscope with this team right now, not only with your starters, but the fact that Shaka Toney got suspended for a year, that takes another guy out of that rotation behind James Smith-Williams. So I believe KJ has a chance to get some snaps right away here and help. But I also believe if football is important to him, I believe he is a steal in the 5th round because I believe there's a good football player and an impactful football player in him as well.
Yeah. And Pete, we know you have a big heart for this team. We know you're a fan, so I'll ask you straight up: the pick that made you just scratch your head.
That's a good question. I guess Daniels, because in the fourth round, you can still get a guy that could potentially start for you. And there's so many questions with Daniels as to what he is. Is he a guard? Is he a tackle? He's played multiple tackle spots. He's played guard. I think a lot of people think his eventual home to maximize who he is potentially guard as well. But again, we get into that argument of, hey, that guy's got positional flexibility.
There you
But
go. Yeah.
but just because he's got positional flexibility, is he really good at one of them? Because I'd rather have somebody that's like really good at one of them as opposed to needing a guy, hey, we can go move him to guard. Well, we can move him to tackle. But if you're moving guys around, that means they're not all pros at a position. Because if you have an all pro or you have a pro bowler at a position, you're not moving those guys. Could he turn out to be a Zach Martin moving from tackle to guard and being an all pro? Absolutely. But right now, the great mystery is what will he do? You look at Wiley, who they brought in the offseason, Gates, who they brought in the offseason, Chris Paul, who certainly gave a great account of himself in the final game against Dallas, playing over at the left guard position. We're hearing rumors that Cosme may bump inside to guard as well. You got Leno, you got Lucas competing with Wiley at tackle spot. So if we took Daniels, and obviously we took Stromberg, we know one domino has already fallen with Chase Roullier. Is another domino getting ready to fall because of the drafting of a guy like Daniels, who clearly right now can compete at both guard and tackle for you on this football team?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of hit it on the head there, and it goes back to the old adage, jack of all trades, master of none. You got to have
right.
Like we look at Trent Williams. Remember when they played the Giants in 16, and he moved inside the guard? That's not an area you want to go, but you can put him at guard if you need to. So, but he built his craft at left tackle.
I mean, look, if you play with a bunch of jack of all trades, you end up 8-9 or 9-8. What does that get you? What does that get?
And you and I, no, that gets you and I freezing on a Sunday night in December.
Gets Ron Rivera and other coaches fired when they do that. So that's, ultimately, look, you can't, and, Jim Nagy, who does the Senior Bowl, and he says it best every year, as soon as the draft is over, everybody's draft grade is an I. It's incomplete because we don't know how good these draft years are until 2 or 3 years down the line. I mean, do you give them an A because a guy like Cam Curl out of the 7th round on a bad Arkansas defense turned out to be, darn near all-pro caliber at the safety position? I mean, that's when you finally have to evaluate these. I mean, this is a guy that's going to go get a really good second contract. And I think that's what you look at when you evaluate drafts is how many of those guys out of those drafts get a good second contract, an impactful second contract from other teams. And to me, that's did they get football players who can compete in this draft? Yeah, I think every guy they took has a chance to compete for a place on the football team. So I don't think there's any automatic cuts in my mind in that draft pool. But the question ultimately becomes is how do they use them? How much of an impact do they have on your football team? And if they become impactful players, then this draft class gets an A. If they're not impactful players, you end up somewhere around B- or C. And if you cut these guys somewhere within a year or two, obviously you would take points off for that as well. But ultimately, you don't grade this draft until probably at least 2 years from now, just to see how many guys make the roster and how much impact they have when they make it.
Yeah, and you talk about getting to that second contract, and it looks like kind of switching over to a veteran now in Chase Young. They kick the ball down the corner, and they decide to not go after the 5th-year player option there. So I guess my biggest question, and we beat this horse multiple times, send it to the glue factory, and now we're making jerky out of it. But I guess my question to you is, and you talked about it, what does this mean? Do we use the B word with them, or do we still give them the opportunity here in year 4 to get it right and maybe earn his contract. And if he does ball out, is he back in Washington next year?
Corey, if he'd played 50 games, which is the minimum he could have played in the regular season for this team, then the B word certainly with this type of production would come into play. But I mean, look, let's be fair to the guy. And I think sometimes because of where a player is drafted, we are unfair to them. I think Chase Young has been a victim. Look, injuries are bad luck. He didn't ask to get hurt. Right. So, I mean, this is bad luck. How fast you come back from injuries. Some guys have better luck than others. I think it was the right football move, similar to what the Giants did with Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones then went out and played his way into a contract extension with the New York Giants. So I think Chase Young has the same opportunity. I mean, look how many guys out of that draft got turned down for their fifth year. It's like 14 of them. So he's not the only guy in this situation that finds himself going into a fifth year having to prove it to the club that he's playing on right now. So I think, look, he can go out and produce, and then the football team will say, okay, this is the player we thought we were going to get. We will reward you with a contract going forward. But from a football standpoint, Corey, they couldn't make that commitment right now because there's just nothing to go on from a criteria standpoint that says, yeah, we're going to give that guy we're going to guarantee that fifth year. It just wouldn't be a prudent football move. This has nothing to do with Chase Young, the person. This is strictly a football move because the guy's been hurt for darn near 2 years now and is just getting back to health. Yeah, we saw a cup of coffee. We got a cameo from him at the end of last season, which is good because he did eventually get on the field. But how he performs in OTAs, how engaged he is, and then obviously what impact he has on the field during the football season ultimately will decide whether that contract comes from Washington or he ends up going somewhere else. And look, if they don't re-sign him here, it's likely because he didn't play at a top level, which means next year somewhere else is probably a 1-year prove-it deal with another club.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then you also think about it too, Pete. It might sound in some folks' eyes that I'm making excuses for, but he's going into his first normal off season where he's not rehabbing, where he's not looking at Steve Harvey and saying survey says, and he's not going through a COVID year and everything.
Makes a difference. It makes a difference. There's no doubt about it.
It's easy. So I feel like it should be easier for him, but what do I know? And the last thing I leave you with, Josh Harrison Company, they're coming down the pipes. They're adding some folks to the ownership group. The stadium is back in the conversation. And I'll ask you this, since they're not going to bring it to my humble abodes back down there in Dumfries. Do you hold out hope that it'll actually return to the RFK site down there in DC, or do you see them, maybe they keep it in FedEx Field and they just kind of build it because they're really going to have the rights to that lot up there too, from what I've read before. So, where do you think this stadium is going to go?
The easiest thing for them to do is either renovate or rebuild on the current site. That's the easiest thing to do. Ultimately, the question becomes and obviously I refereed at some of the schools in that community around RFK over there. Ultimately, what can they do with that land once RFK is torn down? How much can they really build up around it? Which, I mean, there's a chance to build some limited life around there in terms of restaurants and stuff like that, kind of like what they have just outside of Nats Park and the way they've rebuilt that area down in Southeast DC, which, let's face it, before Nats Park came, and now obviously Audi Field adds to it as well. That was an area of Southeast that a lot of people just didn't go venture into. There wasn't a lot of commerce down in that area. So it's helped reinvigorate that area around the Navy Yard, and the amount of housing that's down there now, and the condominiums, 1 bedrooms for $400,000 if you're interested, in a little 800 square foot room. I mean, it's probably about as big as my hotel room here for $400,000. Now, you can pay that if you want. I'm not paying that. But so I think that area around RFK, and to me, what do the residents want? I think the mayor needs to listen to her residents over in that area. Clearly, public transportation is a huge boost if you go down there to the RFK site. So that certainly has the opportunity to play a huge factor, as we know, in this situation. Look, sentimentality, okay, tells you want it at the RFK site.
Mm-hmm.
But sentimentality and good business are two different things. So depending on what their end game is and what they're ultimately looking to do, remember Magic Johnson, of course, had movie theaters right over there in the old Capitol Center site, which is obviously right near FedEx Field as well. So Magic's very familiar with the landscape over there in Prince George's County. And I think look, either way, no matter what, you have to do something better than what FedEx is. And, maybe you can address some of the infrastructure issues, though I don't know how much more you can do coming in and off the Beltway in terms of where FedEx is located right now. But look, sentimentality, sure, says we want it back at the RFK site. But how great of a business deal is it ultimately is what's going to matter here in terms of dollars and cents.
Yeah, I think you're right on that point, too, because it's hard to get out of there. I know it took us a while to get out of there for the Sunday night game. I think it took us close to 45 minutes just to get out of seeing FedEx Field. So, I mean, hey, we'll see where that goes, where that leads to. And, Pete, I appreciate you as always. I'm a big fan and Nat, even a friend now, I could say, because we're always in constant contact with each other. And I appreciate you, one of the voices of the Navy, our Nats guy here. And we appreciate you, Pete. And any projects you got going on that you like to tell the folks about?
I don't know. Navy season's coming to an end. We'll be in Dublin, Ireland, though, August 26th for the start of football season there. Obviously, I'll be with the Nats this weekend, Friday and Saturday here in Arizona. So, and then next Thursday night, I'll be hosting on WBAL in Baltimore with the NFL schedule release, obviously with a Ravens angle doing it for WBAL in Baltimore coming up next week.
There we go. And maybe when you're doing it for the Ravens, they can give you some of Lamar's residual checks out there too. So,
hey, young fella,
brother got paid.
The young fella, I don't care what you say, young fella played it right. And look, I think the Ravens played it right too. I think both sides played this right, but ultimately it came down to, Corey, when you have a quarterback that has proven ability. Now, again, injuries have obviously been a huge factor the last 2 years, but when you have a guy that's got proven ability, clearly has been an MVP in the league and an impactful player, it is harder to go find another one than to retain the one that you have. And I'll be fascinated to see what they do offensively with the new weapons and obviously Todd Monken now as the offensive coordinator. I think the book on Lamar Jackson is incomplete right now because I think this year is an opportunity for him and that team to do something a little bit different. And you're going to have to. Look, to compete with the Bengals, Kansas City, and all of those great offenses, the Bills, Chargers, everybody in that AFC right now, you got to be able to go out and score some points. But also, I'll remind you this, Corey, they were 2 yards away with Tyler Huntley of knocking the Bengals out on their field last year in the playoffs. So, that organization knows what they're doing, man. And sometimes they don't do it in a flashy way, but yet at the end of the season, here they are in the postseason as always and competing to advance in the playoffs.
Yeah, they take on that mentality. They're a grinded out team and grinded out franchise. Hopefully they can actually draft a wide receiver and help them out and help the quarterback out because Lord knows they're going to need it. But Pete, again, I appreciate you, sir, so much. And we'll catch you sometime around. Hopefully we get you back on here during the regular season, and always fun to watch you and your projects. But that is Pete Medhurst. Find him Pete on Sports where on social media, so you can check him out there. And also we'll have some links in the description as well. But appreciate you, sir. And till next time, y'all, we keep that same damn energy. We outlast the bastards together. Love, peace, and hell. We out. Pete.